are still people trickling in, but I think I'm going to get us started so that we can have time for our speakers. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Timna Medavoy. I'm the manager of fundraising and communications for It's Time. Thank you all so much for being here. It's an honor to be with all of you here today. I want to start by just saying that this event is called the People's Peace Summit, but we're not here just to talk about peace. We're here to think seriously and critically about how peace is built and who needs to be at the table in order to make peace succeed. In 2024, under Italy's G7 presidency, countries committed to integrating civil society into Israeli-Palestinian diplomacy. Many of those countries are here with us today, and we're proud to see that vision starting to come to life, even here, bringing real diplomacy into one of the largest gatherings of Israeli civil society. So the evidence is clear. Peace processes that include civil society are not only more inclusive, they're far more likely to succeed. As someone who has spent quite a lot of time in Northern Ireland, I've seen this take place firsthand. And unfortunately, in our context, civil society is often an afterthought. And the truth is that diplomacy needs us. You need us to educate a generation, including my own, who has grown up without a real political horizon, which I'm also really happy to see a lot of young people in the room. Today, both Israeli and Palestinian society, the majority of both societies are under the age of 29, which means that the majority of people living here in this land have never experienced a true political horizon, and civil society is absolutely critical to challenging the narrative of endless war and developing ideas that leaders can carry on. But we also need you. Without a credible diplomatic horizon, our work can only go so far. This panel that we're about to start here is about that essential partnership between civil society and diplomacy and the opportunity to bring them together in a way that gives peace a real chance. Because why? Because it must be, it can be, and it will be. So with that, I am going to hand it over to our first panel. I'm going to invite our panelists to come up to the front. I'm honored to welcome His Excellency Mr. Kiristof Bigot, the European Union's Special Representative for the Middle East Peace Process, and Cțiun, former Deputy Head of Israel's National Security Council and a leading voice for a diplomatic path forward. And our moderator for this conversation, the brilliant ניבין Sandukha, Regional Director of the Alliance for Middle East Peace.
That is nice. We can have a romantic conversation now. Good afternoon, everybody. So thank you so much for joining us here today. And it is a true privilege to welcome such an esteemed gathering of diplomats, some religious leaders, and civil society advocates. Your presence here signifies a shared commitment to the vital work that occupies this afternoon and the whole day, actually, and our collective future. So King Abdullah from Jordan said that solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a pillar and the cornerstone to the Middle East peace. That said, today we're actually going to be speaking with our esteemed guests about the two-state solution and about basically solving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict as a way forward to regional stability. Before we start with our guests, we would like to show a video of Hiba Qassas, the founder and director of Principles for Peace and from the United for Shared Future.
Good afternoon. I was very much hoping to be with you in Tel Aviv today, and I'm sorry I cannot be there in person. But I wanted to send this message, because coming together in this time is significant. The moment we are in has revealed something very clearly. Force alone cannot produce security. There is no military solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and there is no military solution to broader regional instability. This is the hard lesson of the past years, and the past months just made it even sharper in focus. The war with Iran and Hezbollah has made the path to a political horizon technically harder. The region is more militarized, Israel's security debate has become more force-driven, Iran and its proxies still have the capacity to disrupt, Gaza remains devastated, and the West Bank is on the brink of collapse. And the political attention is constantly pulled towards the next front, the next escalation, the next emergency. But strategically, I would argue, the Israeli-Palestinian question has become even more central, because the war has shown that the region cannot be stabilized by deterrence and force alone. Gulf security, Israeli security, maritime security, energy routes, Gaza, Lebanon, the West Bank, normalization. They are now part of the same political and security equation. And here's the point we must be honest about. Gulf states may see Iran and its proxies as a serious threat. They may want a new regional architecture of security, trade, technology. But after Gaza, normalization with Israel will not happen in a serious, legitimate, and sustainable way without a credible Palestinian horizon. And there is Gaza. Phase 2 is stuck. Israel wants disarmament before withdrawal, and Hamas wants withdrawal and guarantees before disarmament, and they're maneuvering. Donors want governance and security before they start reconstructions, and Palestinians need relief, and they need dignity and a credible authority. And the result is a dangerous waiting game. But we know that waiting favors the spoilers. Waiting gives extremists time to reorganize, and waiting makes moderates look irrelevant. Waiting increases the risk that war returns because no political pathway has been built. We all want an alternative to Hamas, but an alternative to Hamas cannot be a vacuum. It cannot be imposed only from the outside, and it cannot succeed if Gaza is cut off politically from the West Bank. The only sustainable alternative is a legitimate Palestinian national framework, supported regionally and internationally with one authority, one law, and one monopoly over force. This week, Palestinians went through local elections in extremely difficult conditions. Of course, some would argue this does not solve the political crisis, and I agree with that. It does not replace national renewal. But it does show something important. Even under fragmentation and violence and occupation and despair, there is still desire for agency, for voice, for accountability, for representation. And the fact that candidates had to abide by the PLO framework, including recognition of Israel and renunciation of violence, is politically significant. We have to pay attention to that. It shows that there is still a national reference point. It shows that political renewal is possible. And as further electoral moments approach, we should be asking how to support leadership renewal, not how to bypass Palestinian politics. The same is true on the Israeli side. I think since Israel is also heading into an election year and a new leadership may emerge, but I think we should be sober about it. On questions of Gaza, on Palestinian statehood, the next Israeli government may not be dramatically apart from the current hardline consensus. A new Israeli leadership may not be ideologically ready for Palestinian statehood, but it may be more responsive to a regional bargain if the price and the benefits are clear. Security, recognition, regional integration, a path out of permanent war, and a different future for both peoples. And this is where our role as political actors, as civil society leaders, as activists becomes really essential. At Principles for Peace, we are proud supporters of the It's Time coalition, and we are proud partners of many of the organizations in this room. Many of the It's Time partners are also leaders within the Uniting for Shared Future coalition, which we are proud at P4P to convene. Today, Uniting for Shared Future brings together more than 550 Israeli and Palestinian leaders and organizations, from members of Knesset to business leaders and security figures and civil society organizations and movements, working every day to advance a political solution. This is strategic. The priority now is to build a political constituency in support of a political solution. Because if the moderates do not organize, extremists will. If Israelis and Palestinians do not shape the future, other will shape the future for us. And if there is no political horizon, the vacuum will be filled by violence. So thank you, and it is time.
Excellent. Confirming what we just heard from Hiba, and despite everything that we are seeing around us, the Alliance for Middle East Peace conducted an AI pulse, which is a polling, and we found out that 74% of Israelis either support or would accept regional normalization and the establishment of a Palestinian state. 81% amount of Palestinians can accept a regional normalization agreement that includes a Palestinian state. These statistics have been consistent over 4 successive polls over the last year. So despite everything we are hearing, there's an urge and there's a need for peace in this land. Yet, too few political leaders are making the case for this vision, especially the young generations who do not remember real diplomacy, have never had politicians explain to them what peace looks like, what a two-state solution is, and are in search of concrete transformational moves, not more conflict management. This is the role of civil society. Explain and socialize the vision nobody is explaining. Expand political space for diplomats, de-risk them for policymakers, and prove a constituency exists. An important topic that I hope we will get into today, and which was the core theme of the Global Alliance meeting last week, was security. Too often, when we talk about security, we only mean Israeli security. But with escalating violence in the West Bank from settlers and the ongoing humanitarian crisis and devastation in Gaza, security must also be understood as a Palestinian need and concern. In polling that we conducted last year, Palestinians identified everyday physical safety as their top priority, even over notions of statehood, reconciliation, or economic issues, which we'd usually see at top. At the same time, security is also the key to shifting Israeli public opinion. When we asked Israelis what would increase their support for a regional agreement, including a Palestinian state, security was central. A narrow majority of 52% believe that such an agreement could improve Israel's security. At the same time, most of the Israeli public is concerned that full annexation of the West Bank would be counterproductive. A majority think that it would place a heavy strain on Israel's military and economy, fuel radicalization, and strengthen extremist groups. When asked openly, the most common responses were overwhelmingly framed in terms of negative security consequences. So, what we are facing is not necessarily a rejection of diplomatic initiatives, but a gap in understanding and translation among public as to how these concepts translate into tangible security outcomes on the ground. This is the role of civil society, again, to explain and socialize the vision that, again, nobody is explaining. Expand political space for diplomats, de-risk them for policymakers, and prove a constituency exists. By engaging in joint Israeli-Palestinian problem solving, civil society can build trust both within and between their communities. This leadership is essential for bridging the gap between people on the ground and formal diplomatic efforts on the Israel-Palestine, helping to anchor any future agreement in lived realities and strengthen its legitimacy. That is why I'm joined here today by two esteemed guests, the EU Special Representative, Mr. Kiristof Bigot, who is a senior French diplomat who was recently appointed as the EU Special Representative for the Middle East Peace Process in 2024. He formerly served as the French ambassador to Israel and Senegal and headed the African and Indian Ocean Department at the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs. Our second guest speaker is Mr. عتصيون, a former deputy head of the National Security Council in Israel. He is an Israeli strategist and former senior government official. He served as deputy head of Israel's National Security Council and held senior positions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He is currently a frequent commentator on Israeli foreign policy, national security, and regional dynamics. So my first question is to Your Excellency, Special Representative. Earlier this year, you co-hosted the Global Alliance meeting in Brussels, where my colleague John Linden and other Israeli and Palestinian peace builders were actually speaking at the panel. As the EU Special Representative for the Middle East peace process, why do you believe that civil society needs to be included into international governments' wider diplomacy on Israel and Palestine?
Well, first of all, thank you for the organizer. I mean, that's a great idea to have this peace summit, this people summit. Quite needed, I have to say. And I'm glad to be here. Yes, I lived 7 years in Israel, so I know some of you. And it's warm to be here. Yes, and it's highly needed because obviously we need a civil society to bring, a voice not only of peace, of strong beliefs, but also of courage to address fears, traumas, and to be able also to provide a vision. And yes, we did have 10 days ago this Global Alliance meeting. I think it was quite successful. It was about an old idea, two-state solution, which is, I think, the only solution that will bring, both freedom and security for both Israelis and Palestinians. And it's good that we stay focused on this. Now we have this intimate, no? I like this intimate session. You should try, It changed completely the atmosphere. It's something,
romantic peace building.
Something, I don't know, maybe romantic, maybe something else. Anyway, so we had this event, and it was good to have more than, I think, 83 states and international organizations being present. And it was good to have both the Prime Minister of Palestine, but also the Mr. Nikolai Mladenov, the head of the Board of Peace for Gaza, so to have a variety of views and approaches there. But yes, we did decide to have an event regarding NGOs. Well, I have to say NGO is part of the DNA of Europe. We're all about democracy, about rights, about freedom. And yes, these NGOs, most of the time, they do criticize EU, but we survive. And more important to this, I think they have a unique way, to promote dialogue. And they are absolutely needed, because if we want seriously peace, yes, it's good to have discussion between diplomats and between states, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, if I may say. The core of it is really to change public opinions, to address narratives, to provide understanding, and to come up with new and creative ideas. So here I think the role of NGOs, and to hear at this event Israeli and Palestinian voice, yes, was key. And I would like to thank John, who was very helpful in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Special Representative. I can just speak because my heart and soul is in the civil society, that we are there to make sure that governments are following the right track and path. It's our responsibility to hold everyone accountable. So sorry for criticizing. If we do. So, Mr. Iran, my next question is actually to you. So the Global Alliance meeting I mentioned earlier was focused on the theme of security. For too long, that's been framed as a function of military or the control of territory. And today, we are seeing Israel to be one of the strongest militaries, and there's more territory than ever under Israeli control. Yet, Israel is not secure.
Not including Sinai.
Oh my God. So, how can diplomacy deliver real security for both Israelis and Palestinians?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Very good to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And always good to be with you, Keristof. Remember you from your ambassadorship days. I'm not going to be diplomatic because I think this is certainly the time for diplomacy, but not, shall we say, old school diplomacy. What we need is very strong, very urgent, and very coercive diplomacy. Because we have a situation of essentially, at least currently, two parties, this Israeli government and certainly Hamas in Gaza, who are totally against any kind of an agreement. And even though the famous Trump peace plan that was enshrined in a UN Security Council resolution specifically says both parties have accepted the Trump 20-point plan, this is a lie. Neither party has accepted this plan. This Israeli government did not accept it, and not only that, is doing everything in its power to foil it. And needless to say, Hamas is following the same pattern. Hiba spoke about it too. So I also had the pleasure of being part of Hiba's initiative and of John's initiative in Oulmp in the last almost 3 years now. And we saw firsthand, and we were part of as civil society, of this major diplomatic initiative that culminated in the so-called New York Declaration in July 25, the Saudi-French initiative, where 151 countries essentially signed off after a very regimented, unprecedented, I think, in terms of scale and scope, of a diplomatic process initiated by MBS and Macron and their very capable assistants, two ladies, by the way, that set for over a year in, I think, 7 working groups, working on all the critical issues and bringing about a comprehensive 7-page document with another dozens of pages of the various working groups, and bringing it all the way to a vote in the UN. And it essentially redefined the terms of reference for a two-state solution within a regional framework after October 7th, which I think is extremely, extremely, extremely critical. Of course, the two governments that were against it, the major two governments that were against it, were the Israeli government and the Trump administration. But since then, and because we now have the Trump 20-point plan, which, as I said, is already a UN Security Council resolution, we essentially have the basic terms of reference for a comprehensive resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian and Israeli-Arab conflict. What is missing is an Israeli partner and, broadly speaking, a Palestinian partner, both in Gaza and in the West Bank, for different reasons. But we have the global political will, and we have essentially turned a page in the history of the conflict, a page that is now full internationalization and peace enforcement. And what is happening in Gaza is the beginning of that. And the fact that for the first time in history, we have an American president and an American government that essentially took over Gaza, because that is the actual meaning of the 20-point plan and of the Board of Peace. And if you go through, the constitutional documents of the Board of Peace, that's what it says, essentially. Donald Trump has taken ownership of the Gaza Strip, as ridiculous as it sounds, but, they managed to get essentially all the international community behind it through a UN Security Council resolution. So the bottom line is we have the diplomatic conditions, we have the global consensus, we have two parties who are belligerent, and we have an Israeli upcoming elections in less than 180 days, after which I'm quite convinced we will have a different Israeli government. And the question is, what kind of policy will that government adopt vis-a-vis this complicated issue of Israel-Palestine and the Israeli-Arab conflict? And here I think there is a role for the international community, for diplomats, for civil society, for all those who are in favor of conflict resolution and appreciate the gravity of the moment, to push for it and to not allow the potential next Prime Minister of Israel, one of which, as you know, is Naftali Bennett, and gave 3 different interviews last night, for those of you who had the time to watch, not to allow him to say the following, and I'm quoting from memory: I will bring peace with Saudi Arabia without the risk of a Palestinian state. Which, as I'm sure you all know, first of all is copy-paste of Netanyahu's policy. Secondly, is a classic January 6th statement, totally ignoring all the lessons of October 7th. And is exactly the motivation that motivated Sinwar to launch the October 7th attack, as we now know from the documents that the IDF captured. Because this notion of shoving the Israeli-Palestinian issue off the table in favor of normalization of the Saudis is exactly what created the motivation for Sinwar. So we have the opportunity, we have the global consensus, we have the terms of reference. What we need is coercive diplomacy on both parties, energetic civil society that will push them in the right direction, and I'm quite optimistic that it's doable.
Thank you very much for that. And actually, I think it. I think your answer just confirmed what we have been saying in our polling as well, that there is not a single political leader right now who is talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and finding a solution to it. Rather, what we're hearing is more of the status quo and managing a conflict. And unfortunately, polling all shows that younger generations want a solution and they want to see a solution. We hope that there will be an Israeli leader who can actually talk about a different future as well. But
just one quick correction. There is one Israeli leader that talks about it. His name is Yair Golan. He leads the Democratic Party, of which I'm part of, full disclosure. And he's very well known in Israel as a brave person who tells the truth and tells things like they are.
Excellent.
And that's what he says. And according to the polls, 10 to 15 seats in the Knesset will belong to his party. So.
We're really looking forward to a different future. That is definitely true for Palestinians and Israelis. But at the same time, you mentioned all of these different initiatives that exist out there. And that actually takes me to my next question to Your Excellency. So, as we've heard, there's so much fragmentation right now on the peace front. So, to give you some examples, we have the Palestinian Authority, we have the National Committee for Gaza, we have Hamas, and each one of them is controlling the different aspects of the Palestinian political life. And then, on the other hand, you have the New York Declaration, which civil society fed into through the Paris Peace Summit. And then you also have the President Trump's 20-point plan as well. And each one of them is claiming to be the route to peace and to solving the conflict. We have the Board of Peace and we have the UN, with each one of them that claims to provide oversight. How can we align those visions? And this fragmentation, which only serves to solidify the status quo because we're so fragmented. At the same time, it empowers the extremists who seem to be much more aligned and clear in their goals. So how do we bridge this gap?
Well, thank you, ניבין, for this very simple question.
I know. We try to make it as simple as possible.
This is so kind. Well, first of all, for New York statement and Trump plan, I think Iran mentioned them already. Yes, of course, we would like to have more unity. Yes, of course, we would like to have more convergence. Yes, there is a lot of fragmentation. That is quite obvious. But at the same time, it was quite amazing that we had, I think, 141 states voting for this New York statement and talking about EU, which is, you know, we like to talk about EU. It's a good example of democracy. Among the 27 states, I think 26 or 25 did agree on that statement, which is quite a remarkable result. And for the Trump plan, it was also quite remarkable because obviously there are strong disagreements on key questions that nevertheless the resolution was adopted by a very large majority at the Security Council. And even Russia and China did not veto it. Anyway, so it's amazing to see that there is some elements of agreement. I think you will see the concept of two-state solution in both documents. Not with the same way, not as explicit on the Trump plan, but it's there. You would see also in these two documents the very clear idea that we need to find a solution, that conflict management is not a way to deal with this. I think you will see also very clearly that the concept of regional security is a key element if we want to achieve this two-state solution, and beyond the two-state solution, if we want to achieve a different Middle East than what we have now. So there are elements of convergence. Now, I will also say they are kind of complementary. If you take, for example, the New York statement, it's more about the long term. It's more like about the vision. And the Trump plan is more about the tactic. What should we do in the upcoming months? In fact, it's clearly said that we have to set a kind of transition. I think it's 2 years of transition. So it's more short term. But still, they are really complementary, these two documents. And now for the EU, well, we want to work with on both sides. It's difficult, you know. We need to work from the two-state solutions, yes, and we are supporting all the NGOs that are trying to find ways to promote this joint dialogue between Israeli and Palestinians. It can be in sport, in theaters, in media, in a lot of different activities. But we are also trying to do the short term. That is, short term is about supporting the mediators. It's amazing, by the way, to have Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, and the US, if I may, working together and to get Hamas to be disarmed. So we do support this, and that's, of course, a key point. But at the same time, I think we do consider that we have to work in parallel tracks. This is an important key track, but at the same time, 6 months after the ceasefire in Gaza, we need to also to address the needs of the people. So providing food is definitely not enough. We need to provide water, power in terms of power station. We need to be able to provide schools, hospitals. So what we call early recovery is something we definitely need to work on that. We now have a plan. It was released 1 week ago, which is called, with this bizarre acronym of RDNA. But this is the plan that can help, you know, to unite people in terms of what should we do for addressing the needs of the people in Gaza. But we also try to work on reforming the PA, because of course Iran is very focused on Israeli politics, but also focused on Palestinian politics. They had elections, local elections last Saturday. We are hoping there will be also national elections, as it was committed by Mahmoud Abbas to French president and the Crown Prince of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And beyond election, we have also to address the issue of reforming the PA. This is an issue on which the EU has invested a lot of energy, of political capital, which I discussed 2 days ago with the Prime Minister Mustafa. And I think it's also a key element, because if we want to promote peace and dialogue, I mean, it's important also that we address some concerns, and also that we enable also the Palestinian Authority to answer the needs of its youth, of its people, in a way that will help everyone around the table to go for a meaningful dialogue. And this is not just, concepts, it's very concrete issues, pages and pages, but it's also, when you look at the Trump plan, there is I think it's, well, I don't remember the paragraph, but it's clearly said that as soon as the PA will be reformed, then it will be in a position to take control of Gaza and on the path to statehood. Well, we're not all compelled to think that this will happen, but at least we are compelled to do our utmost so that it happens. And I think that's part of our endeavor on the EU side. I will stop there, ניבין.
Thank you. That was a very easy question, wasn't it? But if I may just
Can I
add,
comment on the Palestinian election?
Of course, please go ahead.
I was deputy head of the National Security Council in the Prime Minister's office when the original Palestinian elections took place, just before the Gaza disengagement. And me, as well as practically all intelligence analysts, senior people from, military intelligence, Shin Bet, Mossad, all of us were convinced, for a variety of reasons, that Fatah will win. Unfortunately, this is not what happened. And it contributed to, the dire situation that we find ourselves now. So while I'm absolutely for Palestinian democracy and Palestinian elections, I do want to caution against running again to Palestinian elections not under the right circumstances, not in the right context, and not at the right timing. And again, not to sound patronizing, but I think it's critical. We need a legitimate, capable Palestinian leadership that will work on this joint platform that I mentioned before, on a two-state solution, on a regional context, on the French-Saudi initiative, on the Trump 20-point plan, and so on and so forth. We need, and this is very difficult, we need to create two completely new leaderships with completely new policies on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side. And we need to be very, very careful in terms of how we do it. That's what I wanted to say.
So thank you for that. But maybe before I ask my next question, if I may just add to the recipe that you mentioned, Your Excellency, is the role of civil society as well. Because we know that the civil society is actually the glue that holds all of these initiatives together at the ground. And it is the fact that it gives people hope. Just looking around us here today, look how many Israelis and Palestinians exist here to basically say we require a different future. And we are the ones who are still holding the torch that it is possible as well. And at the same time, while diplomats and politicians are talking about a future, we are at the same time translating whatever is happening at the different plans on the ground, and we're holding it. Just to give you an example, in Gaza right now, with the dire situation and the continued humanitarian crisis, it is becoming a forgotten conflict. But yet, we are seeing civil societies, both in Palestine and in Israel, cooperating together to improve the humanitarian situation and to give a better political vision for the future of Gaza, specifically to younger generations. And many of those who work in Gaza are here today as well. So I just wanted to add that to the recipe. And just as a comment, Iran, before again I ask your next question, is civil society in Palestine, myself being Palestinian, have been working with the younger generations. Younger generations in Palestine have created enormous amounts and numbers of amazing leaders who are just waiting for the right opportunity to emerge. And we cannot keep telling them this is not the right moment because this is not democracy anymore. They have to practice democracy, and elections need to be as soon as possible for them to emerge, because only as they emerge, that's when they're going to actually see a different future for the Palestinians. That said, allow me to ask you the next question.
Sure.
Thank you. So your 7-point plan for the next government, Israeli government, links conflict resolution directly to the regional stability. Can you walk us through the key benchmarks of that plan and explain why you believe solving Israel's internal democracy crisis is actually the first step towards a regional solution? And in that process, what is the one thing civil society should be doing right now to prepare the ground?
Seriously, how much time do I have? Yeah, seriously.
2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Yeah. Because then we're going to open the floor for questions.
So I won't answer the question in full. I will just give the gist.
Okay.
Here's what I believe the next Israeli government can and should do. Number one, call for a Riyadh regional peace conference to be convened within 6 months after the formation of the Israeli government. Riyadh conference fashioned around the Madrid conference, we all remember. And as again, I'm sure you remember, the Madrid conference was after the first Gulf War. Hopefully by then will be after the second or third Iranian-Israeli war, regional war, whatever you want to call it, the 1,000-day war that October 7th began. And hopefully we will be in a situation where we can start gathering the pieces into a new regional framework via this conference. And very quickly, what I would suggest it would include: an Israeli-Palestinian track, an Israeli-Lebanese track, and there's obviously a great opportunity there, an Israeli-Syrian track, not with the goal of an Israeli-Syrian peace, full peace and normalization, but Israeli-Syrian non-belligerency agreement, which is within reach. And then a number of regional groups, one of them on a new regional security architecture, taking into consideration whatever the results will be of the war, which hopefully again by then will be over. But in any case, we do need a completely new regional security architecture, no question about that, and a regional economic cooperation group, and a few other groups, could be fashioned again along the same lines of previous initiatives, or new areas such as AI, for example, which is a regional challenge as well as a global challenge. So, women...
Inclusion of women, of course.
Yes. That's not a challenge, that's an opportunity, yes. So that's the first thing I would do, and there are all the other 6 points actually flow from there. One last point, and this ties in the internal Israeli situation with the regional and global one. As I'm sure everybody here knows, Israeli democracy is under very, very severe duress, under attack from this Israeli government and this Israeli prime minister. We are essentially no longer a functioning democracy, and we have a tremendous amount of work to rebuild our democracy, hopefully along similar lines to what is happening now in Hungary. And there is absolutely a relation between this major, major correction, which hopefully will begin immediately after the next Israeli elections, with everything that we discussed here. Because Netanyahu, in his famous Sparta speech, said, among other things, the world is dividing into blocks, and Israel cannot belong to any block. He's right. Netanyahu's Israel cannot belong to any block. But the real Israel, the true Israel, the Israel that will emerge after the elections, can and must belong to the liberal democratic bloc globally.
Thank you, Iran. If I might add something that my late grandfather used to tell me, and it was a reality. Many of the younger generations, myself, I've never lived that reality, although I lived through Oslo. But my grandfather used to tell us how he would take the train from Jerusalem to go all the way to Syria or to Beirut, and the other day in Cairo, or like have famous singers like Kulthum sing in Haifa or in Ramallah. And that vision, if we have it in our mind, it is definitely going to guide us that this is what we want for the future. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And if there's any questions, I'm looking at the moderators if we have time for questions. 2 minutes, maybe, so maybe one question. If there's... Susie, please.
Thank you. So I'm going to give you a real tough one.
But you only have 2 minutes. Okay.
We're listening to you. We're all on the same side here. We're hearing the message that we want very much to hear, but to some extent we're kind of squaring the circle. The President of the United States, who at the moment is calling all the shots, has not said that he supports a two-state solution. His 20-point plan is a plan for a Gaza ceasefire. It's not a plan for a comprehensive agreement. They are fighting in Iran, and the Secretary of War declared, the United States, this is not a fair fight and was not meant to be. So not only are they destroying the rules-based order, they went and kicked the Geneva Conventions in the stomach. As Israelis, we have time, we can listen to Yair Golan say, in a couple of years, you know, the Palestinians will be ready. I keep thinking about the 15-year-old Palestinian child in the West Bank who lost his father, lost his uncle, he can't go to school, he can't move, he doesn't have a passport. Telling him 10 years, I don't think is a viable answer. I ask you, your message not to us, how do you give hope to the 15-year-old kid in the West Bank or in Gaza?
Thank you, Susie. Maybe comments from both of you.
He's leaving the tough work to me.
Comments from both of you.
You know, I speak to many Israelis in recent months, and there is a huge demand for hope in Israel. And I did visit the West Bank last week with a number of former Israeli very high-level security officials and witnessed firsthand the really atrocities and settler terrorism and really awful things that are being committed there, unfortunately with active assistance from the Israeli authorities. So I definitely understand as much as possible from my personal position where a 15-year-old Palestinian kid might find himself or herself. And it is a very dire situation. And I'm not going to sit here and say there is any quick fix. But I will sit here and say that all of us in this room and all of us on the, shall we say, center-left in Israel, and all of us in the diplomatic community, and all of us in the national security, or many of us in the national security community, in Israel, understand that there has to be a resolution to the conflict and that the so-called status quo is untenable for a variety of reasons. And I'm quite sure that the next Israeli government will be forced, if not voluntarily, then by coercive diplomacy, as I said, to move in the right direction. And all I can say is that our role as people who support this strategy of conflict resolution, all of us need to do our fair share, and hopefully beyond. Will this give hope to each and every Palestinian 15-year-old kid? Probably not. But let's focus on what all of us can do individually, collectively, nationally, to make it happen.
Well, I would just say the impatience of the 15-year-old boy or girl is absolutely legitimate. Whether he's in the West Bank, I was there yesterday, and obviously there's an urgent need to protect the civilians from the actions of violent settlers over there, or whether he's in Gaza. But in Gaza, here, and I may disagree with you, yes, the impatience is absolutely legitimate. But here, the Trump plan, both decommissioning or disarming Hamas, addressing the reconstruction, and also preparing a new type of government in Gaza, I think it's fine. The problem is not the plan. The problem is the implementation, and the problem is the timing. So in some way, I have to say, Europeans are the most convinced about the relevance of this plan, but the question, it has to be implemented. And it has to be implemented not in a sequential manner, it has to be implemented in parallel. That is, you have to work on two-state solution, you have to work on decommissioning, you have to work on addressing the basic needs of the people in Gaza. Otherwise, it's not only the impatience of this young boy in West Bank or Gaza, it's also a situation that will become completely out of control. You don't want to have Somalia at your border. You don't want to have another Gaza on the other side. And if nothing is done, that's maybe the future, not only of the young Palestinians, but also your future. So yes, there is clearly an urgency to implement the plans. The plans are there.
Thank you very much, and we're running out of time, so thank you very much. Please feel free to ask a question afterwards, and very grateful for you to be with us today. Thank you.